Chapter 1, Hypnosis and Yoga. After familiarizing myself with the operation of the Chevreul pendulum, I began to ask my subconscious mind questions of a very personal nature. It did not always give me the answers I wanted or even expected, lending an air of credibility to the process. When I was totally convinced of the validity of the technique, I asked the ultimate question: do you remember past lives? The answer was strong and unmistakable. Yes. It told me. From the author's magical record of 1969, one of the greatest discoveries I made in the course of my illness was a realization of the awesome depth and range of knowledge available to the subconscious mind. Even though I count myself an imaginative, articulate writer, mere words cannot describe the experience of such a revelation. When I say you are going to become one of the far-seeing people, I mean more by that than you can possibly grasp before you begin your training. 10. Because of the crucial importance of a long-track, multi-lifetime perspective in your dedication to magic, you must begin your program with these consciousness-expanding and knowledge-extending exercises. Although your religious and folkloric heritage is important, magic will teach you that your beliefs are actually tools and weapons. You are at the center of our reflection of the universe. You can believe anything you choose and the universe will give it to you. Let me give you an example. A secret ritual, transmitted to me orally by my Tibetan guru, permitted me entrance to a sensual astral paradise populated by voluptuous, insatiable dakinis. After an orgy that seemed to last for days, during which I realized every sexual fantasy I'd ever entertained, I finally descended, like the ancient Romans, into decadence and ultimately into satiated voyeurism. The dakinis were very accommodating, doing whatever I could think of to entertain me. Finally I'd had enough. I tried to escape from them, but they were everywhere, smiling, giggling, flirting, posing and purring like kittens. At last I wormed my way through the wiggling horde of naked, velvet-skinned, perfumed houris to a lake in the center of the city of the damsels. In the middle of this pond floated a small boat. In the boat sat a long-bearded man holding a fishing pole. I dived into the water and swam out to him. Fortunately the dakinis couldn't, or wouldn't, swim, so I was free of them at last. I clambered into the boat and introduced myself. "How long have you been here?" I asked him. "I lost count after the first 1,000 years, he said. "Are there any fish in this lake?" "I've never had a bite," he said with a faint smile. "Then why do you fish?" "It passes the time," he whispered. Fortunately for me, I was only visiting the city. I had not chosen it as my heaven, or perhaps my bodhisattva vows had come to my rescue, at least in this astral adventure. And yet Vajrayani was not so easily dismissed. She then physically manifested herself in beauty. 11. Full human form. Disembodied spirits have a penchant for doing this. I took her with me on an expedition to the ruins of lost Lemuria, Nanmotal, and a pond that hangs another tale. Ibn Saba, the old man of the mountain, who had promised his followers a similar sensual paradise, once said, "Nothing is true. Everything is permitted." This is essentially correct, but what Saba, Grand Master of the Assassins, did not mention was the price. 1. Another medieval Arabian sage placed the age of our human race at 44,000 years. Only in the past century did science confirm this. Considering the age of us all and the special effort you have made to obtain this book, I will wager that you have walked this path before. If so, you will understand the essence of the teachings revealed in the next paragraph. During magical operations, a camera will not record angels flying down through shimmering clouds or demons crawling up through smoking cracks in the earth, but these mighty beings are nonetheless real and very powerful. They exist beyond the limits of your personal imagination, and yet they are seen through your prism in the multifaceted lens of the great universal mind. They can be superhuman, subhuman or non-human. They rise up from the vast, dark depths of the collective unconscious and swim into the shallow lagoons of our individual subconscious minds. According to our neo-romantic philosophy, this universal ocean of the deep mind extends beyond the furthest limits of interstellar space, penetrates the smallest subatomic particles, and is connected with the primordial imprint of Dna. It is mirrored in the antimatter universe that exists side by side with our mundane dimension. We think, therefore we are, and are not. The idea of a thing and the energy that flows into its creation are greater realities than the static physical result. We can imagine nothing as great or greater than God's conceptions, therefore our God-given ideas of soul transmigration, reincarnation and magic must exist for those of us who believe in such concepts, because if such were not true it would mean that humankind had conceived a Master 12 plan of spiritual evolution beyond God's power to grant. Given the awesome age, size, cohesion, symmetry, synchronicity and ultimate mystery of the universe, this would seem to be the one and only true impossibility. These precepts are the foundation of our modern magical field theory. Beyond these conceptions lies the inevitable truth that all sentient beings are merely dithering reflections of yourself. If you understand and embrace these principles, you will soon grasp the importance of self-hypnosis and Raja Yoga as basic access techniques and prerequisite skills to mastering the magical art. In 1969, as mentioned in the introduction, I discovered, or more properly, rediscovered, the essential secret key to Solomonic magical evocation. I found out how to summon spirits to visible appearance and converse with them without depending on special psychic talent, but first I had to learn self-hypnosis, and so will you. Granted, you can get the facial reflection distortion method to work without learning hypnosis and yoga. Children have been scaring themselves with the phenomenon for as long there have been mirrors, but then you can't control it any more than they can. Unlike children, you are not going to scream and run even though it might be better if you did. Without the perception of one who understands and controls his own trance, you are operating in an unfamiliar state of mind and dabbling with something beyond your conscious comprehension. Because self-hypnosis was so important in my development, let me tell you briefly how I got into it and how it led me to discovering the secret of the mirror in the triangle and its full significance. You've already read my biographic sketch, so you know my qualifications, but they do not tell the real story. In truth, I had learned the methods and the philosophy I'm now sharing before I ever attained the credentials cited in my resume. The remarkable discovery of Solomon's hypnotic secrets actually propelled me through 7 years of anthropology, 39 degrees of Freemasonry and a year of intensive Tibetan tantric training under the finest magicians to come out of that mysterious land. Now I want to share these original 13 concepts and techniques so that they may open similar gateways for others who choose this path. In 1969 I was a former Green Beret and an avid scuba diver eking out a living as a pulp fiction writer. I had 2 paperback novels and a series of underwater adventure stories in Argosy magazine to my credit. Any impression I might have had at that time about ancient sorcery would have come from the fantasies of H.P. Lovecraft or Robert E. Howard. I liked science fiction and I had a good imagination, but, before my illness set in, I never dreamed that reviving the lost art of Solomon's magic would become the major creative effort of my life. Like so many writers in those days, I was a chain smoker and a perpetual coffee drinker. I assumed that these bad habits were responsible for my frequent bouts with indigestion. This condition became chronic and finally unbearable. I went to a doctor and was diagnosed as having an ulcer. At that time, stomach ulcers were thought to be entirely psychosomatic. A sissy disease for a macho type. I wasn't about to give up beer, coffee, cigarettes and steak dinners to go on a milquetoast diet. I reasoned that if ulcers were caused by anxiety, I'd conquer my inner fears through self-hypnosis and heal myself in the process. In desperation I learned the theory and mastered the techniques quickly. My text was Leslie M. Left.Ron's Self-Hypnotism, the Technique and Use in Daily Living. This book has since gone through several editions and is now considered a classic. I was soon able to suppress the pain. But then it would always return, often worse than before. I must have taken myself as deep into trance as anyone has ever managed through self-induction. But I could not cure the ulcer because, as the doctors eventually discovered when I was almost dead, I was carrying within me a gallbladder that had turned into a mass of solid rock. In the later stage of my illness I was in an altered state of mind that I now realize was a toxic psychosis. Subconsciously I must have known that I was dying. This morbid condition drove me to stranger and more esoteric experiments in self-hypnosis. I began my occult studies with tantric yoga, but, when I discovered our own culture's magical counterpart to that Eastern system, something clicked. I knew with absolute certainty that Western ceremonial magic was my path and I would discover its lost secret. From my studies and my first experiments I had gleaned that a hypnotic effect could be achieved through a fixed gaze on the reflective surface such as a crystal ball, or a dark mirror, and I knew that these devices had often been used by the old magicians, but were they the actual spiritus loci, the place where angels and spirits could be conjured to visible appearance? I could put myself into a hypnoidal state staring at them, but I did not see a face appear or sense a genuine presence. And yet I was convinced that hypnosis was necessary and that some sort of window into the other dimension, like the crystal or the dark mirror, had to be employed. But, if this was true, then why did Golden Dawn magician Aleister Crowley, and his mentor, Alan Bennett, waste so much time and effort unsuccessfully trying to invoke a Goetia spirit out of the smoke from an incense burner? Why did the Golden Dawn oath bind its members not to undergo hypnosis? And why did they virtually eschew those traditional conjuration devices of medieval and Renaissance magicians? On one level we can answer these questions by recalling that in their time the hypnotic trance was equated with spiritualism and magnetizing quackery. In parlor room seances crystal balls were as common as Ouija boards and even dark mirrors were sometimes used. Slaying on these devices was assumed to be humbug because of its widespread popularity. The burlesque image of the gypsy fortune teller with her crystal ball is a cultural icon left over from that era. But, at a deeper level, a more subtle and insidious mental attitude had infected the intelligentsia at the end of the Renaissance and would cheat later generations of Western magicians out of their heritage. 15. The philosopher, 1595–1650, René Descartes, the father of rational philosophy, had been inadvertently responsible for what the military calls collateral damage to spiritual development in the Western world. In the service of fledgling science he had declared that there was a total separation between mind and matter, between mental conception and its physical manifestation. Although this is an oversimplified statement of his theory, it is a deadly accurate assessment of its effect. Although his construct allowed for advances in engineering, the divinely inspired human imagination, the greatest creative force in the universe, had been relegated to the importance of childhood daydreaming. Once you grasp the significance of this outrage against your personal divinity, you are just starting to move that giant stone away from the entrance to your treasure cavern. When you return to Plato and realize that the original idea of something is more dynamically real than its eventual static, physical manifestation, you can hear and feel that huge boulder start to move. It makes a squeaking sound of protest because you have recovered one of the great suppressed secrets of magic, the creative power of the human mind. But simply recognizing this power will not unleash its potential. Along with the stone we have another enemy within ourselves, the chattering monkey of the conscious mind. As we heave against the rock, the monkey dances around us, distracting our attention and belittling our efforts. Finally we become so frustrated and discouraged that we give up and return to reality, and immediately our nasty little monkey disappears. Unfortunately he will return whenever we try to quiet our minds and resume our spiritual work, so we have to get rid of the monkey. Then we have to train ourselves to use this mental power in much the same way that an athlete trains to perfect his or her sporting skills. If you don't think this is necessary, if you don't believe that you need to master self-hypnosis and the Tradakam yoga technique to practice Solomon's magic, I'll challenge you to test yourself. 16. Take a few deep breaths and then stare at your wristwatch with a fixed, unmoving gaze for 3 minutes. During that time you may breathe normally, but you must not blink, you must not think of anything, and you must not change your visual focus. If you perform this test correctly, you will find yourself in an alpha, hypnoidal state when the exercise is completed. Why do I say, you must not blink? Because the unblinking stare, Tradakam, is totally committed to its object, and it is the hallmark of the true magician. However, If you pass this test, you will still want to study this chapter carefully to understand the unique hypnotic characteristics of the magical trance state. You will also need to go through the exercises so that you can teach them to others. Do not assume that because you've gone through a Golden Dawn style program that you can skip this part of your training. Remember, the Golden Dawn avoided any form of hypnosis and was not preparing its members to use Solomonic magical equipment. Relying on the Golden Dawn's indirect mental conditioning procedures as preparation for Solomonic work would be analogous to substituting basic, soft, Tai-Chi training for the rigorous preparation necessary to compete in a full-contact karate match. Granted, a Tai-Chi master, or in our case, a Golden Dawn adept, could certainly hold his own, but only after years of training. Solomon's magic is the art of invoking spirits to visible appearance and invoking knowledge of, and conversation with, holy angels, whereas much of Golden Dawn magic is of a do the ritual to imprint the astral and then see what happens later variety. 2. Be sure you realize the difference. There is also a shade of difference between most yoga trances and the hypnotic state as we know it here in the West. This is best illustrated by another anecdote from my Tibetan training. Early in the program I was trying to master a ritual in which I was to assume the form of Vajrayani and perform various symbolic actions in her persona. 17 Knowing that mudras, hand and finger positions, are sometimes done while visualizing, I asked Lama Ludingken Rinpoche if I was to emulate any of the actual gestures of the deity as pictured in her tanka icon. After a good-natured chuckle at my expense, he patiently explained that this was all done in the mind while sitting inert and physically anesthetized in the lotus asana, somewhat like a Western path working. Most Tibetan magic is done from the inert, seated asana position, whereas much of Solomon's magic is performed standing up and even moving. Our hypnotic trance allows us a unique mobility and a remarkable capacity to operate in the subconscious and conscious mind simultaneously. This enables the operator to ask the receiver, "Do you have a presence? Or would you like it stronger?" without disrupting the trance state. In a solo working, the operator can question his own spirit manifestation directly, going back and forth between his own rational mind and the manifestation from his subconscious as normally as he would carry on a conversation with another person. The reason for this is implicit in the dialogue nature of hypnotic induction and especially the self-directed dialogue developed in self-hypnosis training. 3. Although the Tradikam, fixed gaze, yoga technique is an Eastern derivation, it is the most directly hypnotic of the yoga practices and integrates perfectly with other aspects of Western-style hypnotic induction. As a prerequisite to Tradikam and hypnosis generally, pranayama, controlled breathing, training is also necessary. The magical student does not need to carry this any further than an 8-8-8 count, but he or she should be comfortable with at least a 6-6-6 cycle, no pun intended. It is not my intention to write complete treatises on self-hypnosis and Raja Yoga in this book. You are expected to consult the practical manuals we recommend on these subjects and follow their instructions. I was fortunate enough to discover two of the finest training guides on each of these fields back when I started my practice of Magatenik 25 years ago. These two books have remained constantly in print ever since. For self-hypnosis, see Leslie M. Lacron's Self-Hypnotism, The Technique and Use in Daily Living, and for Raja Yoga, Dr. Ramutri Mishra's Fundamentals of Yoga. Many people have already experienced hypnosis induced by someone else, but the magician must master the technique of self-induction. The reason for this is that magic operates through the will of the operator, and yet the operator must be in trance when he or she operates. This sounds like a paradox. Isn't the hypnotic trance a passive state? Not necessarily. The hypnotic state is really a condition of total, one-pointed concentration. It can be passive or active, but, if it is to be active, then the operator needs to get himself into it or participate in a preliminary meditation wherein the whole circle becomes entranced. In the Orient, hypnotists always put themselves into trance before they attempt to hypnotize others. Even if you have been subjected to the hypnotic state by someone else, you are going to find self-hypnosis a remarkable experience. Perfecting this technique can be one of the major transforming elements in your life. For the very first time, you are in total control of you. And, as discussed at the beginning of this chapter, you can then access your memories back to the dawn of our race. When a true adept says that one should not practice magic without initiation, this is the experience he is referring to, not to some pageant performed in a lodge room. Once you have crossed this threshold in your development, you have empowered yourself to practice Solomon's magic. The hypnotic state is total concentration and total involvement of both levels of your mind. If you operate only from a conscious level, you are intoning words and going through motions while wearing an astral blindfold and earmuffs. As we have noted, this is a form of magic, but it is not the thaumaturgic art of Solomon. Although you will be combining elements of Traticam yoga and hypnosis, you need to know the subtle difference between the two. Sis 19 turns, Traticam yoga, empty-minded, undistracted fixed gaze on an inert object, will induce the hypnotial states called yoga nidra, physical anesthesia, and then samadhi, space-time suspension, as side effects, but it is not a true hypnotic induction because there is no direction involved beyond strict maintenance of a passive mental attitude. Traticam is more properly a form of meditation. It is essential training for our Solomonic mirror in crystal screen because it conditions us to see something without looking at it, to contemplate our reflection in a dark mirror, or the angelic aura surrounding a crystal ball, without analyzing the optical phenomena as they occur. It is easily mastered with regular daily practice. If you get discouraged, just remember that John Dee and Cagliostro would have given their fortunes and have devoted years to practice and to master these techniques if they had only known they were available. Practical exercises. There are a number of ways to practice Traticam. Dr. Mishra lists nasal and frontal gaze exercises which are uncomfortable and alien to Western practitioners. We recommend an easily constructed variation of one of his techniques involving a blue light bulb behind a 12 inches dia. Round cardboard shield with a 1112 inches dia. Filtered hole cut in the center. In the center of the frosted filter, place a 112 inches dia. Black dot. This device is suspended from the ceiling. We call it a samadhi lamp. To use the samadhi lamp, do your stretching exercises. Take your asana, do a few minutes pranayama and then lie flat on your back and fix your gaze on the illuminated hole, with its central black dot, for 10 to 15 minutes. Do not explore the lamp with your eyes, just look at its glowing center. Try not to think about the optical phenomenon as they occur. Try not to think about the relaxation and numbness coming over you or the hypnotic state you are drifting into. Try not to think at all. 20 Along with your Traticam training, you will be regularly improving your skills in self-hypnosis. The first key to mastering self-hypnosis is physical, mental relaxation. You'll notice I've joined the two words together because they go together. Physical relaxation is best achieved by first stretching the muscles of the body and then compressing them. For stretching, do the classic yoga sun salute, then for compression, point out and stiffen each leg and thumb, curling your toes. Hold the leg rigid for 10 seconds. Thrust each arm out straight and make a hard fist. Hold it for 10 seconds. Relax. Roll your head in a circle. Open your mouth and work your jaw muscles. Tighten the muscles of your face. Take several long, deep breaths through your nose. Hold the air in your chest at least as long as it took you to inspire it, then blow it out through your mouth. Having achieved relaxation, you must learn to empty your mind. To empty the mind and to develop the ability to shift the center of consciousness to other parts of the body, take a comfortable asana position with your back straight. Close your eyes and focus them upward without strain. While maintaining this position and gaze, perform at least 4 cycles of simple pranayama, without hand manipulations, on a 4-count inhale, 4-count hold, 4-count exhale, 4-count hold on the void. With your breathing finished, keep your closed eyes focused upwards while you quietly imagine that your body is growing larger and larger until it is nearly 50 feet tall. Your skull is a great, dim-lit hollow vault half filled with deep, dark, still water. You, your consciousness point, are in the form of a small pearl floating half submerged in the water. The water is comfortable, safe and protective. Above you are the random thoughts that flit across your mind. You see them in the form of luminous fireflies darting back and forth to no purpose. They buzz and chitter without meaning. You allow yourself to sink just below the surface. Now you can neither hear nor see those distracting thoughts. You are at peace with 21 and yourself. You sink, down to the level of your throat. And then down into your chest. After 3 minutes you may resurface, realizing that you are now the master of your mind. These unwanted thoughts that have plagued you for so long are no more bothersome than gnats on summer day. Now you are ready to hypnotize yourself, or, if you have been leading a group in these exercises, you are all ready to enter the hypnotic state. Here follows one of our ritual hypnotic inductions you may modify and practice with. This one is adapted from our advanced path working system, but it gives the general idea. The soul door referred to is a floor-to-ceiling dark mirror set in an ancient Egyptian-style door frame. You can see it veiled in the video. Note that we make the inert, seated physical body huge and keep the enlivened spiritual body within, into which we project our consciousness, very small. Once you have perfected your basic hypnotic and yoga techniques, you may use this secret Tibetan method of inner plane projection with full effectiveness. As we stare at the planetary symbol of, our physical eyelids are becoming very heavy. Our bodies are totally inert. We sit like great stone statues surrounding our double cube altar, which has become a huge, tall building. Our spirit bodies within us are now as small as a finger on the hand of our huge sleeping physical forms. These tiny spiritual bodies are now the radiant centers of our consciousness. We are filled with living energy and eager to be off on our journey. We look to westward and see the distant star of our destination, the sapphire of as it beckons to us far away in the night sky beyond the great pylons of the soul door gate. Now we allow our physical eyelids to finally close. We project our spiritual bodies out the third eye chakra toward the soul door 22 gate and through the great pylons into the vast night sky off the endless universe. Ahead of us gleams the star of leading us onward. We are passing over the dimly lighted landscape 1,000 feet below. Here you will insert the description of the Chim path over which you are flying. This is also the method of choice for projecting into and through Chim pyramids. It is likewise a vital skill necessary for exploring the powerful psychic centers or chakras within your body. With self-hypnosis and Raja Yoga training you can master even advanced techniques such as this in months instead of years. It is said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. I hope that the mental imagery evoked by the above passage will serve to convince you of the importance of hypnosis and yoga as basic foundation skills for this art. Do not neglect your mental training. Chapter 1/Ij. 1. To understand the mystery of the false paradise, students of Solomon's Magic should read Burton's original version of The City of Brass and Alflia Walaya, The Arabian Nights. 2. This statement may disturb some of my senior G.D. colleagues who have become genuine shamanic wizards in spite of the Golden Dawn's non-hypnotic methods. This is not to say that the creative visualizations in the pentagram and middle pillar rituals are not very valuable and even essential in their own right, but they are projected onto the astral, not received from it. The G.D.'s Tatwa scrying exercises were taken directly from an Eastern source. 3. Those who have popularized our evocation technique have stated that solo operations are quite difficult, possibly dangerous, and should be avoided. This demonstrates their lack of understanding of the importance of self-hypnotic training in Solomonic magic. A solo operation, for an entity of the same sex as the operator, is usually less difficult due to the reduction of the personal variables involved.